Many thanks for your time here on News Desk. Now let's move on and do a lot more stories. This time around, let's look at something very crucial to everyone's livelihood here. Now there seems to be some sort of shortage in parts of Accra. Now, areas including Adabraka, Kokomlemle and parts of Osu have been without water for several days now. And really, we've been trying to get a lot more understanding as to really what the cause could be. Now, joining me now in studio to help us understand what the problem is Communications Director of the Ghana Water Company Limited, Stanley Mate, who joins us live now in studio with a lot more. So, Mr. Mate, good morning. Many thanks for your time. Thank you for joining us, really. So, what is the problem at all, really? Because we've done some checks. We have people still going around checking a few places, and it seems to be that there's no water. Is that the case?
Yes, I'll take this opportunity to first of all apologize to our consumers living, especially in the western part of Accra. And this is as a result of high voltage that we're experiencing at our treatment plant in Weja. And as a result, we are unable to produce. Now, our equipment are such that when there are power surges, it becomes very difficult for us to power our pumps. So we need stabilized power to enable us to do that. Now we experience very, very high voltages, and if it so happens it trips off the pumps, and sometimes it blows it off. Sometimes it blows our control panels and all that. So it's very dangerous when we have to switch on our pumps when we have very high voltages. So this is the situation. For the past 3 days it's been so. And the day before yesterday, they managed to stabilize it. So we pumped for about 6 hours. It happened again, and they've been working around the clock to make sure that we can stabilize power so that we can produce. So the ECG has actually promised, and they are working on it. I mean, they have requested for reinforcement of engineers so that they can have the situation rectified as early as practicable. So we are relying on them. For us as Ghana Water Company, we have no challenge at all with our equipment. We are only waiting for the right level.
So how often does this really happen?
It seldomly happens, but when it so happens, I mean, we just call on ECG to rectify it, and then we move on. But I think this one has taken a bit of time. I mean, it's been now 48 hours, and I think it's taken a bit of time.
But for most of the areas we've been checking, it's been more than 48 hours, really. They've been without water for almost a week. So if this explanation you are bringing in suggests that, okay, the situation is just because of a surge that happened some 48 hours ago, I mean, really, there are some gaps there, really.
You know, there is some interconnection between the eastern and the western part of Accra. We had some challenge over the last weekend, with the eastern part of Accra. So it affected the central part of Accra.
What was the problem you had?
Now, one of our valves got faulty around Legon.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with ECG?
Exactly,
okay.
It has nothing. So that was rectified over the weekend. And just as we resumed production from Bong, we were faced with this high voltage in Weja. And that is why the central part of Accra may complain that they haven't had some water for now. But for the western part of Accra, it's just been 3 days, a little over a day. Because in between, they managed to stabilize their power, and we had to produce for 6 hours before it reoccurred. But now they've invited more a reinforcement of the engineers to have the situation rectified as early as practical.
So does this in any way suggest there's no cause for worry regardless of the situation? We have enough water to pump to virtually every single home?
There's no cause at all, because there's nothing wrong with our equipment. We are just waiting for power, and then we'll start production. There's enough water, there's enough raw water. We have chemicals, we have everything. Our equipment are functioning, except that we can't power because of the power surges.
Okay, now I'm checking a particular quote of yours here, and well, that's away from these surges anyway. And you're saying that 90% of sachet water is actually not safe for consumption. It's impure.
Okay, I think that is wrong. It's a wrong assertion. I didn't say they are impure, but I'm saying that 90% of sachet water producers use water from Ghana Water Company Limited as their raw water for production. Okay, most of them do not add any value at all apart from packaging the water for sale. And I said so also because there are allegations from that quarter, Sachet Water Producers Association, that water from Ghana Water Company Limited is not wholesome for consumption and all that. And I felt that was below the belt, okay? Because if you look at the conditions under which they produce, they cannot accuse the Ghana Water Company Limited of providing unwholesome water. And I've said over and over again that we have two standards for water production. You have that of WHO and that of the Ghana Standards Authority. The Ghana Standards Authority standards is even higher than WHO, and we are able to meet both of them. So you can't accuse the Ghana Water Company Limited of producing unwholesome water. It is very, very unfair. Meanwhile, you use our water as your main and only raw material.
But if they say they use your water yesterday, they need to treat that water before.
What treatment do they do? And have challenged them, okay, that they do nothing apart from the well-organized bottled water producers and, let's say, some of the well-organized sachet water producers who have huge equipment, and even with them, all they do is to just filter, okay, the water for production. They do not add any chemicals. I heard Magnus talk about some using reverse osmosis and all that in purifying the water. If you use reverse osmosis, you get all the impurities out of the water so that the water becomes like distilled water. For instance, that is what we are doing with our desalination plant. We use the reverse osmosis process. It removes everything, every debris, every substance from the water. So it becomes like distilled water, and then it is remineralized, okay, before it is pumped for consumption. So if they are using reverse osmosis in treating their water, I wonder how they do about it. I will go about it, and I wonder how they remineralize it. If that is what they are doing, that is what they are doing, then we really need to check on them again, because that means that they are giving us distilled water to drink, which is also not the best. Okay, the water should have some minerals in them to make it wholesome and okay for our health. Okay, so you can't give us distilled, pure, extra pure water without any mineral at all. It is wrong. Okay, I admit. For us, I think that people consume sachet water just because of the packaging and where they find themselves. In my home, I drink directly from the tap, okay? But if I'm in town and in traffic and I'm thirsty and I don't have water in my car, I think I can only get sachet water because of the packaging, but not because it is better than water from the tap.
So that's where you stand. You believe people patronize these water because
of its availability at certain locations where you can't go and fetch from the tap. If you come to my office because you are my guest, okay, and I want to serve you water, I'll give you bottled water.
So if I come to your office, you're going to give me bottled water? Why don't you fetch water from the taps for me? If you're so convinced that really the water you're going to serve for.
It's because of the packaging. That is why I'll give you bottled water, but not because it is better than the water from the tap. You understand what I mean? Yes.
Interesting. But let's talk about the desalination project. You just mentioned it, so I just felt we need to go back to. There were a lot of issues about the taste of the water, particularly, and residents complaining. I remember you say that certain things were being done about the situation. What's the update on that as well?
Okay, the raw water for the desalination is the sea water. Okay, and the sea water is very salty, high content salt. But we use the reverse osmosis process in siphoning all the salt and all the impurities and everything, and at the end of the reverse osmosis process, we have very pure water. Now we can't pump pure water into the system because there is no mineral and not safe and not good for consumption. It's like distilled water. Okay, so what we do is to remineralize it, then we can bring it. We can have a balanced pH for people to consume. But because of that perception that it is seawater, people just assume that there's salt.
I have been there. I have tasted it. And
yes.
It's salty.
Anyway, I wouldn't want to dispute that fact because you are saying it directly. Yeah. I also live in Teshi and I consume same water. Okay, and I think that it is normal. Besides, every water.
You think it's normal?
Hold on. Besides, water everywhere in the country has some chloride content. Okay, now the WHO standards for or levels for chloride content in water is between 0 and 250. Now, with our checks and with the daily quality assurance that we do and laboratory analysis that we do, we have never exceeded 130. So even if there is some form of chloride,
is there some form of chloride in it?
I'm talking about chloride. I'm saying even if there is chloride, we are still within the range. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with the water from the desalination plant.
But
okay,
if,
and I'm using chloride because there are several chlorides, and in science we call them salts. Okay, so we have sodium chloride. Those are the salts that we take in, but we have other forms of salts, like potassium chloride and all that. All these are found in seawater. Okay, so we abstract all of them, everything, and we remineralize it. So we get at a very good pH and wholesome for consumption. So there is no problem at all with water from the desalination plant.
So for me, I as a person, I went there and I tasted it and it felt salty, really. I'm not used to that.
You're not used to water from from that area because you don't live in that area. Where do you live?
I live in Adenta.
You live in Adenta, so you drink from Kpong. Now the source of Kpong or water from Kpong is the Volta River. That is not polluted at all. It has minimal pollution. So we use very little chemical in producing water from Kpong. You understand? So you may taste it differently. Okay, and it is also different from the source from the desal plant, and it's also different from the source, the Densu River source, because the Densu is also polluted with other substances, industrial pollution, okay, and other chemicals,
so obviously
farming and all that.
You need a lot more chemicals to purify.
This
probably leads to that situation.
Exactly.
Where it tastes a bit saltier than.
Yes, but the bottom line is that all these that we are talking about meet the right standards for water consumption. So it has no negative effect on your health. It is good for your system.
Okay. Now, finally, before you go, you were calling for an increase. You've gotten your increase. I'm sure the Ghana Water Company Limited is ecstatic about this, really.
No, we are not
charging more than 70%.
We are not too excited about it.
I saw my bill and I was scared, really, when I saw my water bill this month.
You shouldn't be scared. You should be happy for Ghana.
Really?
Unfortunately, we are not too happy about it because it is still below the cost of production. But at least we all understand the situation in Ghana. We can't just jump and increase water bills over 800% and all that. So we need to gradually do that. Okay, so let me take some time to explain this. What the PLC has done for the Ghana Water Company now is to reduce the lifeline tariff from 0 to 20,000 liters to 0 to 5,000 liters. Now the lifeline tariff is supposed to be for the poor, okay? But unfortunately, the poor do not benefit from the lifeline because they live in compound houses and they all have 1 meter. Okay, so at the end of it all, they go beyond the threshold of 20,000 liters a month. It is the elite who live in flamboyant areas with very small families who fall within the 20 all the time, so they pay less. So what we have done, what the PLC has done, is to reduce it to 1,000 liters, and then encourage landlords of such compound houses to apply for separate meters for each apartment, so that with the small families, they can fall within the lifeline, so that the elite who wash their cars with water hoses and water their lawns and flush toilets even after a quarter wee-wee or just a little wee-wee from a baby and all that, will be paying more because then they will exceed the 5,000.
So you are looking for further increases? Really?
We can't do that now, and now I know the organized labor is clamoring again for the automatic adjustment formula, which is fine, so that we wouldn't have any major review after 2 years where there will be very high increases. And with automatic adjustment formula, it depends on the parameters and the factors that goes into the calculation for this. So when prices of those parameters go high, then it will go high by a percentage. If it goes low, then it will be reduced. And you know, one funny thing, one of the parameters include service provision or our service standards. Okay, our this thing, our SOPs. So assuming that we fail in even providing adequate water, or even by not announcing to the general public of some challenges that we face, and as a result they do not have water, we could be penalized, and such that
you should be, I think you should be penalized, really.
Such that there'll be a reduction in tariff, or it will be stable, and it has happened a few times. So I think it's good for us, so that we are put on our toes as utilities, so that we function effectively to serve the general public better. So I think it's all good for us.
Okay.
But
but essentially,
we need the services 24/7, and if you need it to that extent, then we need to pay for it.
I see. So, from what you say, I gather that you'll be pushing for an increase, maybe in the next, say, quarter, or in the next 2-3 months.
We send our reports to the PLC on quarterly basis. Okay, so based on what they find in our report, then they will decide to give us increase or decrease.
Will you be pushing for an increase this quarter or next quarter?
We will send our reports to them. Our reports will indicate that cost of, let's say, chemical is going high, cost of operations is going high, and the dollar rate is coming down, and this is doing that, this is doing that. So with all the dynamics within the
is
parameters,
a yes or no?
Yes, it's a yes or no. No. Now the report will go, so they decide on whatever we present to them.
It's obvious you don't want to answer that question, but many thanks for your time anyway. And Stanley Mate is the head of communications at the Ghana Water Company Limited. He joined us in studio to help us understand a few things, particularly about that water shortage in some parts of the capital. He tells us that, well, the situation is being worked on by the ECG, and once it's been rectified, you should be expecting some water in your household. But do we have any timelines, though?
That should be answered by the ECG.
The ECG.
But we are in close contact with them, such that the moment that is fixed, we will start production.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, away from that, though, when government and the Trades Union Congress have agreed on reductions to the percentage increases in electricity tariffs implemented in December. Now, the reductions are mainly aimed at mitigating the impact of the recent tariff increase on the most vulnerable. The agreement was reached after a 4-hour meeting at the Flagstaff House on Wednesday. Minister of Employment and Labour Relations represented government in the negotiations.
It is agreed and resolved on this day, 27 January 2016, as follows. That with effect from 1st February 2016, government will provide relief for the lifeline consumers and other vulnerable groups. The relief will translate into the following rates. So for those in the band 0 to 50, 45%, 51 to 300 band, 50%. Tariffs for all other consumption bands remains unchanged as an understanding. As agreed in 2013, the stakeholders have renewed their commitment to the implementation of the automatic tariff adjustment to avoid the large increases associated with non-implementation and its effect on incomes of households and businesses. And we have also agreed further that the ECG should within the next 2 weeks rectify all billing anomalies associated with the utility tariff adjustment that took effect from 14th December 2015. The parties will continue to engage, however.
Meanwhile, the Trades Union Congress, the TUC, says it is unhappy with the outcome of negotiations with government, which has only met one of its demands. On Wednesday, government and Labour reached a deal to reduce electricity tariffs by 15% effective February 1. Consumers using 50 kilowatts per hour will now pay 45%, whereas consumers using 51 to 300 units will pay 50%. So time now for us to deal with some cash. Let's talk numbers with business.